What next do we have?
Next,
Bukola?
We look at that emerging and disturbing trend, and how do we protect our girls against, the menace of this trend. And what are we talking about? It's no other than, this thing called the hookup culture, and as it affects, young persons who go out to parties and then they're declared missing. What is fueling it, and how can this be checked? Joining us to have this conversation this morning, we have Omolola Odutola, who is the Police Public Relations Officer, Ogun State, who joins us virtually. We also have Dorothy Njemanzi, a development expert and communication strategist, who joins us from our Abuja studio. Ladies, thank you so much for coming through for this conversation at this time. I'm going to start with the Police Public Relations Officer, Mrs. Odutola, who joins us via Zoom from Abeokuta, Ogun State. We see that, there's a lot of cases of ritual killings and, arrests and parade coming through, particularly from Ogun State. And we know that you're doing some work in that space. Before we get into the work that you're doing to address this, I want you to walk us through what the demographics are from the cases that the Ogun State Police Command is tackling. Demographics in terms of, the age range, gender of those who are caught, and then perhaps you also want to talk about the factors that seem to be fueling this upon your interaction with those who are arrested and paraded and perhaps prosecuted.
Thank you very much. I hope I'm audible. Thank you.
Go ahead.
The ritual killings that has been occurring in Ogun State of recent, I would like to say that it is not new, but as much as possible, the Ogun State Commissioner of Police, CP Alamutu Abiodun Mustafa, with the cooperation of other management team, so far has been able to tame this very ugly incident. And it stems from an ugly perspective from young persons who believe that ritual killing could enrich them. You have some of these unscrupulous elements who deceive them by saying that if you bring or if you get human skulls or human organs and they make some kind of concoctions for you, that those kind of concoctions, after using them in the prescribed mode, would eventually get them rich. And that is why we are having an advocacy and sensitization, trying to enlighten young persons to make them understand that engaging in ritual killings or ritual activities does not in any way make you rich. And this conversation also will go further by talking about the menaces and why young persons have decided to ally themselves with the get-rich syndrome by also involving in ritual killings. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yes, exactly. So some of these things let's also look at you've spoken about the perpetrators of the crime and how they are deceiving young girls. What action is the government taking, at least for Ogun State, for instance, to begin to maybe rein in on some of these guys who are perpetrating this evil on one hand? On the other hand, what exactly is the authority telling these girls in terms of caution and all of this? Because it is not wrong to go to these parties that they are going to. But at the end of the day, some of the risks they take predisposes them to some of this danger that we're all worried about.
The Ogun State government, particularly the Commissioner for Women Affairs and Social Development, we work in tandem with the Ogun State Police Command at all times. We have also been able to provide a counseling section by the Women Affairs, the Commissioner for Women Affairs. Aside from that, whenever we have cases such as this, if peradventure maybe the girls are not maybe used for the rituals, We also have a proper way of helping them go through the distress that is in form of their mental health, the mental disorder, the anxiety that that they feel. These are part of what the Ogun State government partners with the Ogun State Police Command in doing. But when you're talking about the age ratios, we have the hookup cultures where you have females or young girls between the ages of 20 to about 32 years. You will find most of them in this age range. And the reasons why they get into these menaces or this hookup culture is not perfect. Some of them feel
oh dear.
All right, we'll get back to the police public relations officer.
Their parents, and also the get-rich syndrome.
All right, just a moment. We lost you momentarily, but at least we got part of what you were saying. But quickly, let's speak with Dorothy Njamanze in our Abuja studio. And this conversation is happening smack in the middle of 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, the global campaign. And that's why we're bringing these issues to light. There is a responsibility of our society to protect our women and girls, and I imagine that's why you're wearing, that color. But speak to us about the trends you've seen quickly, and talk to us about what we're missing, really, as a society, maybe security agencies, as individuals as well, because it's everyone's, responsibility, really.
Thank you very much for having me on. Now, I'll go straight to what predation looks like, right? A lot of the predatory trends that we see have existed in society all along. And instead of tackling them head on, we make excuses. We apply the route of morality policing, and try to guilt trip people when harm happens to them. Look, you stay in your house, harm can happen to you. You go out, harm can happen to you. A lot of marriages, a very healthy amount of marriages in Nigeria happen through what? Hookup. Let's assume that the definition for hookup would be meeting somebody and eventually meeting up. However you meet up, whatever the terms of your meeting up is between you people, especially when you're adults. Now, my very big concern would be the fact that the predation system extends much to children. A lot of children are lured through the predation system. And so the onus lies on us. Lagos State has a mandatory reporting policy. It's important for every other place in Nigeria to have mandatory reporting policies so that, where suspicious movements are seen, they can be reported. They must be reported. And then for law enforcement, if people report things to you and then you're lax, or, you expect people to apply certain routes and write petitions before you're able to take actions, then there's a problem. The proactiveness of law enforcement, is something that we bank on. Just saying something online is reason enough for law enforcement to take action. One thing I know is clear. Between adults, there's a limit to what you can get involved in. If adults decide to come together, that's fine. However, bad people plan. They plan very well. They gain the trust of whoever they want to harm to minimize chances of you raising alarm for them to be caught. And so since we know this is how bad people operate, the next thing is, okay, in your dealings daily, I heard the police woman talk about people going to parties. And I also remember reading about the lady who was killed by somebody who was her pastor in church, So it could be anybody, whatever the dimension or whatever the out appearance that bad people choose to take or operate, the law enforcement should be, ready to swoop in and ensure that there is minimal to no damage that is done. And then the reporting culture, the mandatory reporting culture of society is one thing that can help to minimize these things. Now, since we cannot control what adults do amongst everything, we can at best profess security tips to everybody, because the hookup culture affects men as adversely as it affects women, but maybe the numbers may be more with women. considering the fact that there's more pressure on men to prove that they have resources that can make them look like what? Big boys, that's what they call them, right? So what can you do? Make sure as much as possible, wherever you go in, somebody knows where you're going, so that it's easy to hold people accountable, especially the ones that people tell you, do not mention that you came here. That's the one you should mention to at least 2 or 3 people. This is where I'm going to, why I'm going to, and how I'm going. It makes it easier to track people in case, the people have decided to go astray. But the truth about it is that we can never tell at first instance, most times that people are going to harm us.
Just a moment. Let's take it back to Abeokuta, to the police PRO. So that for context, so that people understand the scale of what we're dealing with. Maybe you provide us a bit of data. There's the idea of screaming loud that this culture is actually affecting the young girls, and they are leading to their death in their numbers. So maybe give us a basic data as to 2024, what you have on your hands, so that we understand the scale of what we're dealing with. Because if we contextualize, people understand how serious this is.
Yes, this particular menace is very serious, and I would like a lot of young persons to understand the dangers of the hookup culture. Every day, that is today, take for instance, today, we have lots of reports of missing persons. These cases come in form of missing persons. And when we have a case of missing persons, by the time we begin with our investigation, not less than at least 10 ladies or 10 young ladies go missing on a daily basis. And by the time we begin our in-depth investigation, we come to discover that it is not just by accident. Most of these missing cases are connected through hookup channels, through hookup apps, where young women fall victims of persons or strangers who they don't know. They casually invite them to unknown places, and by so doing, they fall victim of being used for ritual purposes. So I can say that on a regular basis, from Ogun State Police Command, we receive not less than 10 cases or more of missing persons, and most missing persons are young ladies from Ogun State Police Command on a daily basis. So it calls for caution. It calls for serious cautioning from our parents. We have to start taking this seriously, and from our young persons, especially the young girls between the ages of 18 to 32 years. Do not, when you are leaving your homes, try as much as possible to have a second person or a third person informing them about your whereabouts. It won't just make any atom of sense to just move out without telling anybody. But because it is a hookup culture, where a platform where these young ladies meet strangers on hookup platforms, and by the time they invite them to strange places like a house or an unknown destination where they don't know, these young persons get used for ritual purposes.
All right. And that's quite worrying, because if you do the calculation, 10 times 30 is about 300. And if there are 31 days in a month, that's about 310 missing persons in a month. And I want to take you back to Ms. Njemanze. You said some very significant things earlier on, that the predatory culture is everywhere. Anyone could get hurt anywhere, even without being hooked up and without, engaging in the hookup trend, and that's quite true. But if you observe the trend of what is in today's context called hookup, it's about cases where, as the police public relations officer has said, they're invited to unknown places, and they go to these parties or these events. Doesn't it speak to our value system? And shouldn't parents and wards take more responsibility, for how these young persons, view life as well?
Okay, I'm surprised. I mean, the statistics reeled out were mostly 18 years and above, and those would be adults. So to what extent can parents monitor the activities of people who are 18 years and above. I think we should be realistic. I work in a survivor support center and in Abuja, and I see high numbers, very high numbers of people who keep luring children to unknown places, and they lure them through, the internet, they lure them physically and everything. These would all come under the hookup culture, if that's the thing. The truth about it is that while there are so many cases of, predation that are going on, there are also success stories because strangers meet and they develop relationships. Now, the biggest currency that is exploited is that currency of trust. As a people, we trust a lot. We're a trusting society. And now we're just supposed to think about ways to interrogate the trust at different levels. As an adult, whatever it is, be a little more cautious, look out for red flags. So many times the hookup things that were said, people look and see, oh, this person has similar number of friends with me on certain apps. And so the person should not pose a risk. And so that trust that is brought to play is what is mostly exploited. With adults, there's a limit to what you can say. I mean, people should just be more vigilant. People should be more in tune with the realities of times in which we are. And then for the aspect of the get-rich-quick syndrome that people think is linked to this, I think the government needs to step in here. What do I mean by that? If there are more schemes available to people to empower them, not just when it's time for elections, we'll start saying how many people were empowered amongst other things. Now is the real time to empower people so that pressure of wanting to to break the jinx of being in these hard times, would minimize. I think in so many cases where I have had direct instances to deal with people who are victims of this predatory culture, which is what I would call it, a lot of people have said, well, the pressure on me was too much. I needed to eat. I needed to do this. And from her side, it's also, oh, well, he promised me a few things. Well, I went out to eat food. I went out to eat to eat noodles or something of the sort. So the youths need to be more empowered.
Final thoughts on this, and I'll go to the spokesperson of the Ogun State Police Command. You gave us one half of the story, so let's get closure as we wind down in less than a minute. Out of the 10 reported missing daily, the girls, how many do you find eventually? Or are you saying that in a month, for example, there will be 300 plus and they'll remain unresolved? So please give us the closure to that so people understand this in context.
The closure to that is that, as people move from place to place, as people transport from place to place, we get hints, we get alerts that so and so persons are missing. But when it gets to as regards the hookup culture, I'm trying to say that this particular hookup culture we're talking about, it pertains mostly young persons who involve themselves in bonding, in relationships that has no commitment with strangers. Sometimes when we have cases of missing persons, after about 2 or 3 days, they get found. But I'm stressing this particular hookup cultures greatly get themselves on hookup platforms in order to make money. That is the get rich quick syndrome. That is what I'm talking about. Most of these hookup apps, most girls who find themselves in these hookup apps get missing. And the high consequences is that they are usually slaughtered for ritual purposes.
All right, that would be a fine place to leave this conversation, and we hope that lessons have been learned. But of course, it's an ongoing one, and we'll continue with it and see the results that we can get from this, hopefully positive ones. And we've been talking with Mrs. Omolola Odutola, the Police Public Relations Officer, Ogun State Command, who joined us virtually via Zoom. We've also been talking with Ms. Dorothy Njemanze. She's a development expert, communication strategist, who joins us from our Abuja studio. Thank you so much for your time, ladies.
All right, so from there, we'll switch gears now to touch base with our correspondent. We've always tried to do this as much as possible to bring you up to speed what's going on at the moment in real time. Deborah Agbalama is our correspondent in Port Harcourt. She'll be telling us what's been going on in that city. You know, with the Port Harcourt refinery coming upstream, excuse me, and the PMS price, and how it's impacting transportation. Deborah? Deborah, if you can hear me, can you unmute your device so that we can get a feel of what you're saying? Okay, guess Deborah is trying to sort out. Deborah, can you hear me now? Okay. All right, we'll go on a quick break. When we come back, we'll get to more conversation. Join us again.